Welcome! In this and next week's presentation, we will be reviewing policy priorities and strategies, also defined as the policy formulation phase of ESP development. Policy formulation responds to the question, where would we like to be in the future? It includes selecting medium to long-term goals and objectives, as well as the major strategies to reach those goals and objectives. The first step of the education sector planning development process is the education sector analysis, which provides an overview of the current state of the education sector, including the major challenges within the education system. The challenges identified in the ESA will then be the basis of policy formulation, along with existing national policies and international commitments, used to identify the overall plan goals, objectives, and strategies. Now, how exactly do we go about translating education sector challenges into overall priorities and strategies? Well, there are many ways to go about this step, and it is not a straightforward process. The best approach will depend on the context and the consensus reached among the key actors involved. No matter what the process or technique used, it will be important for it to be participatory, with diverse and knowledgeable technical experts. We will provide an overview of one particularly useful tool for this process, the problem and objective trees approach. In today's presentation, we will focus on the problem tree approach, and then continue next week with the objective tree approach. So, what exactly is a problem tree? A problem tree is a simplified visual representation of a central problem, its underlying causes, and overall consequences and effects, arranged in a logical vertical sequence. In the context of the ESP, problem tree construction allows for collaborative group discussion to define the main root causes and effects of identified issues in the education system. Generally, individuals will work together within technical working groups for this exercise. To develop a problem tree, you will need to identify a focal problem or a central issue identified in the education sector analysis, and then identify the related challenges derived from the education sector analysis, but also from your own practice. The challenges form the causes or the roots of the tree. You will then need to hierarchically arrange the selected identified challenges in order to demonstrate a cause and effect relationship. Identified effects or consequences from the focal problem will then be placed above the focal problem, the branches of the tree. While it may look a little overwhelming at first, do not be intimidated. In the following slides, we will walk you through step by step on how exactly to build a problem tree. Let's begin. The very first step is to identify our focal problem. We can think of this as the trunk of the tree. It is the focal issue that we would like to address and that the rest of the tree will be built around. To help identify the focal problem, it is common practice to focus on one sub-theme, such as access/equity, quality, relevance, and management/governance, for one subsector. This will allow us to really develop a comprehensive tree. For our example, let's focus on early childhood education, or ECE, access. What do you think is a major issue related to access in early childhood education? take a few seconds to reflect. Few children accessing early childhood education will be our focal problem. Is that what you had in mind? Remember, there could be many answers, but low ECE access is a common basic issue in many countries that will serve as a solid example for our problem tree. Now that we have identified the main problem for ECE access, we may want to list all of the different challenges around this focal problem. This could include the challenges that we have identified from the education sector analysis, as well as our own practice. Following our example, the data showed many related challenges to low ECE access, including the high level of poverty, that ECE is unaffordable for many families, that there is low parent demand, few ECE programs are available in rural areas, there are no standards for building ECE schools, there is a lack of parental awareness on the importance of ECE, high fees are charged in ECE schools, there is a lack of ECE teachers in rural areas, and there are limited safe, adequate learning spaces in rural areas. Therefore, all these challenges are causes for why few children are accessing early childhood education. After writing our complete list of the causes of our focal problem, the next step will be to arrange them into a hierarchical cause and effect relationship. In other words, what causes what? To do so, it can help to first think about which challenges are most directly linked and grouping those challenges together by major topics. For instance, here we have grouped the challenges related to ECE costs in one group, the challenges related to parental engagement in another, and the challenges related to ECE provision in rural areas in a third. Next, within each grouping, we will need to hierarchize the causes to understand what are the underlying causes, or what causes what, in order to create a cause and effect chain. This will take some reflection and discussion among the group. Just remember that there is not necessarily one correct way to construct a problem tree. What is important is that the logic is sound and supported by evidence from your ESA and your experience. Let's go to our first grouping, related to ECE costs. We can reason that the high level of poverty and high fees charged in ECE schools are the causes for ECE being unaffordable for many families. In other words, the reason that ECE programs are unaffordable is because families have limited resources to pay high school fees. We should therefore place the boxes high level of poverty and high fees charged in ECE schools underneath the box ECE unaffordable for many families, with upward arrows to demonstrate the cause-effect relationship. Let's move on to the next grouping related to parental engagement. We can reason that there is low parent demand for ECE because parents are not aware of all of ECE's benefits and therefore do not enroll their children in ECE programs. We can therefore place the box lack of parental awareness on ECE importance underneath the box low parent demand for ECE with an upward arrow to demonstrate that lack of parental awareness is the cause for lack of parent demand. which then contributes to few children accessing ECE. Now, the last grouping of boxes. Few ECE programs are available in rural areas because there are limited safe, adequate learning spaces in rural areas to establish ECE programs, and there is also a lack of ECE teachers. We are then left with a fourth cause, lack of ECE school building standards. Well, in this grouping, you will actually have a third level of boxes, because we can say that one of the reasons that there are limited safe learning spaces is because there are no clear standards for building safe, child-friendly ECE schools. The box lack of ECE school building standards will be placed, therefore, below the box limited safe, adequate learning spaces in rural areas. Before we move on, let's check the logic. High levels of poverty and the high fees charged in ECE schools lead to ECE being unaffordable for many families, which contributes to few children accessing ECE. Lack of parental awareness on the importance of ECE leads to low parent demand, which contributes to few children accessing ECE. Finally, lack of ECE school building standards leads to lack of safe, adequate learning spaces in rural areas, which, along with the lack of ECE teachers, leads to few ECE programs being available in rural areas, contributing to few children accessing ECE. Sounds good. Of course, as these are complex issues, it is likely that your causes are interconnected. For example, parents' demand for ECE might not just be low because of their lack of awareness, but also because there are not adequate facilities in their area, or there are no teachers, or high fees charged. We can show these relationships by adding additional arrows between the boxes, as we have done here. So far, we have constructed the roots of the problem tree, or the causes, and the trunk, that is, the focal problem. The last step is to include the branches, the effects. We must now consider what are the larger effects of the focal problem on the education system, as in, what are the effects of few children having access to pre-primary? Why do we care about this issue? In this case, limited ECE access means that students are not arriving to primary school ready. Low school readiness leads to students performing more poorly in primary school, with lower learning outcomes, increased repetition, and increased early dropout. At this point, we should have a clear illustration of the focal problem, underlying causes, and the broader effects of the problem. You may now be thinking, but isn't the point of the ESP to offer solutions to identified problems? Don't worry. That is where the objective tree will come in, which we will discuss in the next presentation. This week, we will be using our work from Module 4 to develop our very own problem trees as a group around an assigned central issue. Yes, very exciting.